The Sun is the nearest star to the Earth, and it provides a convenient laboratory in which we can study the four forces of nature at work. Gravity is responsible for creating the high density and pressure and temperature in the core of the Sun, and that triggers nuclear fusion reactions, which are controlled by the strong and weak nuclear forces. It's the electromagnetic force that then transports the energy from the core out to the surface. But the problem is with all these processes that they occur deep in the core of the Sun, and we can't directly see their effects. So for this reason, scientists have developed several techniques to study the interior of the Sun, and we're going to look at a couple of them here. To examine the first technique, known as helioseismology, we visited a solar observatory located at 2,000 meters above sea level. Tenerife, one of the Canary Islands, is a volcanic island located off the coast of West Africa. It was first used as the site for an observatory in the 19th century and is now home to a large number of telescopes. Because of the clear skies and low pollution, it's ideal for studying stars. But not all of these telescopes are used at night, as Tenerife is home to the solar observatory of the Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias. The large white buildings all house solar telescopes, which look at the Sun in a variety of ways. But we're here to see the pyramid, where they're carrying out studies of the interior of the Sun. The director of this work is Dr. Pere Luis Palais.
When you look at the Sun, what do you see? It's white light, the light at which your eye is sensitive. But this light, unfortunately, it's coming only from the outer 1% of the Sun. In the core of the Sun, the thermonuclear reactions take place, converting hydrogen to helium. And from those processes, very complicated process, a lot of light is emitted. The problem is that a single photon produced at the core of the Sun takes about 2 or 3 million of years to reach the surface of the Sun and therefore reaching the Earth.
Scientists from around the world have tackled the problem of how to look inside the Sun. The trouble is that the photons generated in the core are continually scattered, absorbed and re-emitted as they make their way to the surface. And by the time they emerge a few million years later, they contain virtually no information about the processes that generated them. Until 20 years ago, all that solar scientists could study was the surface of the Sun. Its sunspots, its magnetic field, solar flares and so on. Then in about 1980, a new technique was suggested that's become known as helioseismology.
I'm on my way out!
Earth scientists have learnt a great deal about the interior of the Earth by studying seismic waves, the waves naturally produced within our planet by earthquakes. As these waves travel away from where they were produced, their speed and direction is continually affected by the type of material they encounter. It's as though the Earth is set ringing by the earthquake like a gigantic bell. The seismic waves can provide information about the internal structure of the Earth because the speed with which the waves travel depend on things like the temperature and density of the material through which they pass. Now, just the same effect is seen with the Sun, but of course we can't travel to the Sun's surface and place a seismometer there. So how do we collect the information in this case? The answer lies with the Doppler effect, the apparent shifting of the frequencies or wavelengths of any waves emitted by a body when it moves towards or away from an observer. Here's a representation of part of the spectrum of the Sun. This small region covers the wavelength range centered on yellow light. The shorter wavelength is on the left and is greenish, while the orange light has a longer wavelength. When helioseismologists study the Sun's spectrum, they see dark bands moving backwards and forwards. This is a particular spectral line produced in the Sun's atmosphere, and the amount of movement has been magnified here for clarity. The movement indicates that the wavelength of this spectral line is continually changing. When the line is on the left, its wavelength is shorter than normal, and when the line is on the right, its wavelength is longer. A shifting wavelength like this indicates that the Sun's surface must be alternately moving towards us and then away from us. Motion towards us makes the wavelength appear shorter, and motion away makes it appear longer. This is the Doppler effect. So the seismic waves make the Sun's surface oscillate, and by studying this motion, using observations of the light it emits, the period and amplitude of oscillation of the Sun's surface can be measured. Here at the Solar Observatory on Tenerife, these oscillations are measured using a device known as a spectrophotometer. Light is sent by mirrors to the interior of the pyramid, where the spectrophotometer is stored in well-controlled physical conditions. The spectrophotometer contains its own reference source of light, produced by the same sort of atoms as those in the Sun's outer layer, the photosphere. The incoming light is split into its component colours by a prism, and individual spectral lines selected with filters. By comparing a spectral line from the Sun with the wavelength of an identical spectral line produced in the lab, very small changes in wavelength can be detected. Known as resonance scattering, this procedure can detect changes in speed as small as 10 or 20 centimeters per second. In a structure as large as the Sun, 150 million kilometers away, that's extremely accurate. The first major result from helioseismology was to discover that the Sun is pulsating in and out once every 5 minutes. But that's not all that's been found. Superimposed on top of these so-called global oscillations are many thousands of other vibrations, all happening simultaneously. A pure note, such as that produced by this tuning fork, consists of just a single frequency. But if I play the same note on my saxophone, it sounds slightly different. And one reason for that is that notes produced by musical instruments contain a mix of harmonics. Just the same is true of solar oscillations. The fundamental or pure note of the Sun has a period of about 5 minutes. But just like with a musical instrument, the Sun's oscillation contains lots of other harmonics as well, and each harmonic or mode of oscillation corresponds to a different pattern of seismic waves within the Sun's body. Now, global modes of oscillation, like the one shown here, affect the whole surface of the Sun at once. Red indicates that the surface is moving away, blue towards us. And these modes contain information about processes happening deep within the Sun. Other modes of oscillation, like this one, affect smaller regions of the Sun's surface. It's as if the surface of the Sun has ripples, like the surface of the sea. Some parts are moving towards us, while others are moving away. These modes contain information about layers of the Sun closer to the surface. The greater the number of vibrations, the closer to the surface the oscillation began. By choosing whether to collect the light from the whole Sun, or merely from a small part of it, different modes, and therefore different depths, can be sampled. Each of the spectrophotometers samples different parts of the Sun's surface, and helps to build up a picture of all of these oscillations. It's the end of a long day of data collection here on Tenerife, and all of the solar telescopes close up. But to get an accurate picture of the Sun's behaviour, data collection needs to continue 24 hours a day. To get around this problem, similar instruments have been built around the world. Computer models of the Sun are able to predict what modes of oscillation it should have, and when that's compared with the modes that are actually seen, there's a very close agreement. And that enables scientists to suggest what the interior of the Sun actually looks like. The temperature and density decrease steadily as you move from the centre outwards. In the centre you've got the core where nuclear fusion takes place, then the radiative zone, the convective zone, and surrounding it all the photosphere, the outer 1% of the Sun that we actually see. So helioseismology provides a way of seeing inside the Sun in much the same way as conventional seismology enables Earth scientists to see what's happening inside the Earth. Now we've said that the photons produced in the core of the Sun take millions of years to emerge through the surface, and by the time they do, they contain virtually no information about the processes that generated them. There are some particles, though, that emerge virtually unaffected by everything they encounter. These are the neutrinos, and to look at how they're studied, we travel to Sudbury in Canada. A normal morning for the miners of Inco's nickel mine in Sudbury, Ontario. After donning protective gear and trusty lamp, they board the cage for the 2,000-metre descent to work. This is just one of Inco's mines in the Sudbury area, but this particular mine houses a project that will help us to understand more about the Sun. It might appear strange that scientists would study the Sun so far underground, but this is a neutrino laboratory. The director of the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, or SNO as it's affectionately known, reminds us what neutrinos are.
Neutrinos are among the most basic building blocks of nature. Neutrinos come in, as we think, three flavors. Electron neutrinos, muon neutrinos, and tau neutrinos. They interact only through the weak interaction. We don't know whether they have a mass, or a rest mass, I should say, that is greater than zero. The limits on their mass are quite stringent. And so we know relatively little about them in comparison to other particles. Because they're so difficult to detect, because the weak interaction gives us little opportunity to observe them.
By studying solar neutrinos, scientists can learn not only about the Sun, but about the neutrinos themselves. Different reactions occur producing neutrinos with slightly different energies, but all of those neutrinos simply stream out of the Sun. And the problem is, they're very difficult to detect. In fact, there are millions of neutrinos streaming through your body every second, and they don't even notice that you or the Earth are there. Deep inside the mine is a large cave that has been completely hollowed out and lined. The detector is, at present, being assembled within that cave, put together piece by piece. The overall scheme consists of a large acrylic vessel, 12 metres in diameter, that will be filled with heavy water. This will, in turn, be surrounded by ordinary water. Heavy water provides a good target for neutrinos to interact with. Where normal water, H2O, contains hydrogen nuclei that consists simply of a single proton, heavy water, D2O, contains deuterium nuclei that consists of a proton and a neutron. It's this extra neutron that's the key. The SNO detector, unlike others around the world, will be looking for two reactions.
The first reaction is one in which that neutron is converted to a proton by specifically an electron neutrino, the type of neutrino that is produced in the core of the Sun.
An electron neutrino strikes a deuterium nucleus and reacts with the neutron, producing a proton and an electron. The electron streams away, leaving behind two protons in its wake. As it travels through the water, the electron will cause a flash of light which can be detected. The second type of reaction can occur with any flavour of neutrino. Here, the neutrino simply splits the deuterium nucleus in two, leaving a proton and a neutron to be slowed down by the surrounding water. But the flashes of light produced by the reactions are far too faint to be detected by the naked eye. the vessel will be surrounded by 10,000 light detectors called photomultipliers. Each of these tubes contains a cell that is sensitive to the wavelength of the light produced as a result of the neutrino interactions. When a flash of light is observed, the detectors register both its intensity and position within the tank.
They're sufficiently sensitive that we could detect a firefly at about 6 kilometers away with these detectors. There are 10,000 of them. They are approximately 20 centimeters in diameter for each one, and they surround the central volume of heavy water, which is itself contained within the spherical structure that you can see behind me. The bursts of light detected by the photomultipliers are typically such that one would have approximately 100 of the 10,000 photomultipliers triggering at any time. The bursts of light, in fact, are formed in a conical shape, originating from the direction of travel of the electron, which itself originates from the direction of travel of the incoming neutrino.
There have been solar neutrino observatories built before, but all of these others are sensitive only to detect electron neutrinos. And there's a problem. The number of neutrinos detected by these other experiments is far less than the number predicted by models of the Sun, and this is known as the solar neutrino problem. Now, one solution to the problem could be that the models of the Sun are wrong and it really does produce less neutrinos than we think. But the solar models match up so well with the results from helioseismology, people don't want to throw that away. There is another possibility, however.
The reason why the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory has an opportunity to perhaps provide a solution to this solar neutrino problem is the fact that in addition to detecting specifically the electron neutrinos that are produced in the Sun, it is also possible in snow to observe a reaction which is insensitive to neutrino type and therefore would detect the total flux of neutrinos coming from the Sun and reaching the Earth, even if the electron neutrinos have been converted into another type.
These two types of reaction will each give a different signal in the detector, so scientists will be able to tell the total number of neutrinos of all types that are emitted by the Sun, and also the total number of electron neutrinos that are detected here on the Earth. If those two numbers are different, then the most likely explanation is that neutrinos change flavour along the way. It would be as if this strawberry ice cream suddenly changed flavour to chocolate. But for neutrinos to change flavour, they must have mass, so proving whether or not this is the case will enable scientists to investigate the properties of these fundamental building blocks of the universe.
Because neutrinos are so difficult to detect, because even in 1,000 tons of heavy water, one only observes a burst of light roughly once per hour that come from the neutrinos from the Sun, we must take extreme precautions to remove all other sources of light, in particular other forms of radioactivity that can result in the generation of light in our detector. If this detector were on the surface, it would glow as the northern lights do. Because we are 2,000 meters underground, the intervening rock filters out the cosmic rays that would otherwise produce light bursts in our detector.
You've seen how scientists from all around the world are involved in exciting projects to understand how the Sun works. And the problem of the Sun illustrates another feature of science, how it's sometimes necessary to devise ingenious methods to investigate something that at first sight seems invisible. And finally, the Sun is merely the nearest star to the Earth, so understanding how it works can help us understand how other stars work, and ultimately how the universal processes operate throughout the time and space of the universe.